VGC is supported by Patreon. Check out patreon.com/videogameschronicle for more podcasts, ad-free browsing, and extra content. Thank you for your support. I feel no need to forgive, but I might as well. It's VGC the Video Game Podcast with me, Jordan Midler, Andy Robinson, Chris Dring, and Alex Donaldson. This week, Xbox faces one of its darkest weeks ever, but first, how's it going, folks? Chris Dring, last time you were on this podcast, you misbehaved so much that I had to censor some of the things you were saying. How are you doing?
Well, what embargoes did I break last time? I can't remember what it was. At Capcom?
Maybe, but it's okay because on that same podcast, Ralph Skillup broke several embargoes that left him sending us a message while we were over the Atlantic saying, "Oh, probably don't put that podcast up."
That podcast got delayed by a week.
Yeah. We were all home and then it was cutting back to us in the energy drink suite at the JW. Someone else that went to the energy drink suite at the JW, Alex Donaldson, how you doing?
Good, yeah. Well, apart from how ultra terrible a lot of this week has been, but yeah, I'm doing good.
Good. Yeah, it's no surprise that'll be the majority of what we talk about this week, but there's been other stuff kicking off. Speaking of kicking off, Andy Robinson, how are you?
Shut up. I'm alright, I think, yeah.
How is your first 24 hours, 48 hours that's just the two of us manning VGC, the two-man power trip?
It was alright. There's stuff going on. Mm-hmm. Stuff going on. You know, it's going to get worse before it gets better, I imagine. Yeah.
Things have went on the website, so really that's all you can possibly ask for. As you may have noticed, Chris Scullion is currently on his tour of Japan with his secret family. Hopefully we'll hear what he's been up to in a couple of weeks, but in a couple of weeks' time, Andy is going to Japan. Check that off your bingo card. So we'll be swapping out. You're going to Japan, mate.
Am I?
I've got it booked for you. Yeah. You're getting a Shinkansen from Paisley all the way to Tokyo. So
imagine.
Look forward to that.
It won't be the last time this year.
By the way, I didn't know that. Speaking of going off the garden path, down the garden path, I didn't know there's a class above the green car in the Shinkansen. Yeah.
Huh.
Context. What's the green car?
The green car is like first class.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a higher one where you get to murder quarters.
I know there's a really cool one that goes from Osaka to Nara, and it's like the scenic one. And
yeah, they love a themed train, right?
It's like an old fashioned train, though, right? It's like Hogwarts Express vibes.
We're going on, so we're going to go to Fukuoka. I've never been to Fukuoka out west, and it's the place where the Hello Kitty Shinkansen goes.
Yeah.
So for my two daughters, I'm like, oh, good, we got to do that, right? But it's one of those slow ones that stops at every stop. So I had to bring the kids into the office in front of the monitor and go, right, kids, do you want to go on the Hello Kitty Shinkansen for 4.5 hours, or do you want to go on the normal one for 2.5 hours? And there's silence, and they're just like, the fast one. But we worked out a way. We're going to have a day out in Kobe, and that's one of the stops. So so we're going to be on it for 12 minutes.
Nice.
So it's perfect. Get your photos. Go to the shop.
I'm sort of hoping the next time I go out, I'm going A&A, and obviously when you fly A&A, there's a bit of a potluck about what plane you get, but there's a chance you might get the Pokemon plane. So
we saw when we were at Summer Game Fest, we saw the Star Wars plane they had. Awesome.
Man.
4 minutes into the podcast, Jordan, you've lost control. It's
I find that it keeps Andy's attention up if we let a little bit of the Japan valve, like if you let a bit of the Japan steam out there. Chris Dring, since the last time I saw you, you were reviewing an energy drink.
How long till he mentions the gamebusiness.com? A free advert.
The gamesbusiness.net. The last time we spoke, you reviewed the Viking Berry Monster. Have you continued on your monster journey, or has that been the end?
Actually, I think, and I loved it. I think I'd love to explore it. I have to say, I've been quite busy lately. I've heard of my name coming up on this podcast a few times in the last few weeks. I'm looking forward to diving into the VGC podcast I've missed to hear exactly what was said.
It's hugely
we encourage all of our readers to tune in to find out what Chris Dring said.
Yeah.
Let's get him cancelled.
Okay, before we get into it, I want to give a special thanks to our Patreon members at the season ticket holder tier on patreon.com/Video Games Chronicle, where you can get more podcasts, videos, and lots of good stuff, including ad-free browsing. So thank you to Vicious, Sanartanto, Sanartanto? That's not someone, it's Tanner Santos.
Star Wars bounty hunter.
Sanartanto, Serkin Toto, The Good Doctor, Shay Dougal, Matt Huggins, Marmus Prime, Ryan Cabane, Sam Biggs, Ginger Jotun, and Mark Edmonds. Let's get into it. Story number 1, Xbox's very bad week. Microsoft has announced sweeping layoffs on Wednesday, which could amount to over 9,000 staff losing their job. The publisher's troubled reboot of Perfect Dark has been cancelled. The initiative has been closed. Rare's Everwild has also been cancelled, and several senior members of the studio have left. ZeniMax online boss Matt Firer has also left his studio amidst the cancellation of Project Blackbird. Romero Games has announced that its next game has lost funding and most of the staff are now gone, and Phil Spencer isn't retiring any time soon. An absolute killer's row. Let's start at the start with Perfect Dark has been cancelled and the initiative has been closed. Alex Donaldson, your thoughts on this first piece of this long list of bad news?
I mean, I'm fucking gutted because I love Perfect Dark. I think I'm the guy who says and will stand by Perfect Dark is better than GoldenEye. It isn't close.
100% is, yeah.
But also, I think Perfect Dark's a really interesting franchise. There's a lot to mine there. I think it's so fascinating that this game hasn't survived in a world where Cyberpunk 2077 was a huge success and all the initial metrics are suggesting IO's Bond has a really good shot of being really popular. And Perfect Dark is the middle of that Venn diagram. So the fact that they've ended up, and I've known a bit about that game's development over the course. I've posted about it a bit on Blue Sky. That there was a long time in this game's development when it wasn't a game, when nothing existed. Andy, you had a report in 2022, I think, right? Basically saying to that effect that it was spinning its wheels and it was a lot of people arguing over the direction and stuff like that. And I think the saddest thing is, although, yes, it's been said by some people that the demo that was shown last year was a lot of smoke and mirrors, two things. One, I refute that smoke and mirrors thing anyway to some degree. It was a vertical slice, but it was a playable vertical slice.
I think there's a lot of a lot of the discourse around that is people who don't really understand what
exactly. I mean, how many? Perhaps Jordan a little bit less so in the sense of when you joined the industry, but us three, having done so many of the old E3s, how many fake ass demos did you sit through for BioShock or some Ghost Recon or another or whatever, right? That was just normal. But the games came out. Those demos were an important milestone where in creating those highly scripted, tight demos, they made a bunch of gameplay design decisions that then actually inform the rest of the game. And that was what they went through with Perfect Dark. And they, over the last 2 years, they were starting to make serious headway into being a game. And it wasn't just the initiative and Crystal Dynamics working on it. There were other studios working on it as well. So I think it's a shame because right as it was coming together, it's got canned. And this is something perhaps Chris can talk to a bit better. But the way I read that is, unfortunately, because there were so many wasted years of spinning wheels and doing and accomplishing very little, the fact that they started to accomplish quite a lot in the last 2 years was pretty much worthless, because when you look at the overall balance sheet, it paints a pretty grim picture, which I guess is probably also to some extent the case for Everwild as well.
There is a sunk cost element to this. I know there's a sunk cost fallacy, but they have spent that money. So the question would be, was the game going to be a hit when it came out? And I don't know how well development was going. We know historically both Everwild and Perfect Dark had troubled development. And I guess the question, Microsoft, how many games are they working on? Something like 40 games?
Who many?
All these studios. Some of the studios are, in hindsight, I'm not sure they'd have bought them. Now, if they knew they were going to get Bethesda and Activision, I'm not sure they would have bought Double Fine. But the they've got an awful lot of games to come out. They've got a lot of things to support, and they're probably looking at things that are costing lots of money. They need to deliver commercial returns. It's not just about, would this game have been a hit or would it made some money back? They need to go, will it deliver the margin? We've just convinced our bosses at Microsoft, they're always compromised by Microsoft, to spend $80 billion buying studios, and they have to deliver returns on those sort of things. And I think any studio, any studio that's making something that isn't one of these super temple franchises, they're going to have to justify their costs. And Perfect Dark would have been an expensive project, and that's why that's my take on it. I don't know. Obviously, maybe development was going very well. Still, I don't know. I liked what I saw last year. But yeah, this is the thing with this whole story, though, because it's not.
And I think it's probably significant that they're in California as well, right?
Yeah.
Like that's probably a very expensive project.
Yes.
Yeah. The thing with Perfect Dark and Everwild probably were cancelled because of their own issues.
You
but
said
ultimately,
it in your piece, right?
Yeah, but Microsoft, they would have said, we need to cut our costs here. You remember the games market is going through a contraction. People are spending less time playing games. And it comes a point of you need to cut costs, and you start looking around. When we worked at Repop, Alex, right? They cut EGX Resd.
Yes.
And EGX Resd broke even, but it never, ever, ever, which is a UK event, by the way, and it never, ever really made any money. They cut it because they needed to focus their energies on the things that were going to deliver the bigger returns. And that's ultimately what they said in their statement. It's just.
Do you think an element of it is, because I look at it to some extent, and I see two games that got cancelled that quite famously, at least in the private circles, in the behind the scenes circles, that quite famously got lost and spent a lot of time chasing their tail. And I think it's telling that, like, for instance, two studios that spent a lot of time in the independent minds and have leaders in Tim and in Fergus who know that when they were independent, you couldn't get lost for 5 years, because if you got lost for 3 or 4 or 5 years, you'd go bust. So those guys, there's zero chance of them doing what ended up happening at Rare and at the Initiative.
Yeah, I do think if you're part of a big corporation, you don't think with a business mindset. One of the things, I've said this before to them, and I don't know if they'll appreciate me saying on a podcast, but I think Rare Replay was a mistake. Right, one of my favorite things Microsoft ever put out. I've always believed it was a mistake because they can't. Rare, it's going to be really hard now for Rare to monetize its back catalogue. You've released 30 games, pretty much all your big games, into one box, and you can probably pick it up for $5 now. Whereas, if they'd have gone, right, we're just going to take the Banjo-Kazooie games, put it in a box, charge 50 quid for it, stick it on, or $60 for it, stick it on Switch too. You've got 1 million copies, right? You could do the same for Battletoads, you could do the same for Perfect Dark, you could do the same for Conquer, and you can keep monetizing that for years, and that can fund the studio for years, those kind of activities. But they didn't. They stuck it all in one box to celebrate the 30th anniversary, which is a great thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do to celebrate the 30th anniversary. But it's not a very business-minded thing to do.
I think that project was a knee-jerk, right? I mean, that was coming off panic. Of Connect Sports Rivals in a different universe. Probably, if you're being brutally honest, the smart business people would have shut Rare then. They spent 10, 15 years trying to work out where they fit into Microsoft. They were purchased for the wrong reasons. They didn't really find an audience or their place within Xbox. And it kind of, that was at the moment where they closed Lionhead, right? Not as historic.
Lionhead got lost in a different way, though, because what you're saying there is Lionhead is Rare if Sea of Thieves had been a disaster and hadn't worked.
No, but you got to obviously. No, I'm talking about this is pre Sea of Thieves.
Yeah,
and Sea of Thieves at that time was still very unclear what the game was, how they were going to monetize it. Sea of Thieves was the first Game Pass game. They didn't know how they were going to monetize Sea of Thieves. There was, you got to keep in mind, I was working at Playtonic next door to Rare at the time. We had loads of employees coming over from then. So I had ear to the ground. They were working on like a microtransaction store and stuff, and they were still trying to figure out what that was. It was by no means certain that Sea of Thieves, which was a huge success, was going to happen at that time. When we did, founded Playtonic, and we did Ukulele, and it was, the pitch was all like, oh, we're going to appeal to the people who used to like what Rare used to be, right? We had the black and gold logo, and that felt fine and cool because Rare were doing this other thing. at that point, Rare had rebranded. Their logo looked like it was for Microsoft Office. They were making Kinect games, and they were actively removing anything pre-Microsoft acquisition from their office. I've got a photo on my phone somewhere of like a shed or warehouse full of the most heartbreaking like memorabilia that they pulled off the walls in that era, and they auctioned it off to staff. I think most staff have got them. If you walked around Rare, even this is like more than 10 years ago, you would have known where's the jetpack?
Yeah, I've been since.
It's not there. They pulled it off the wall. It was very much. And do you know what? I didn't blame them at the time. I remember interviewing Craig Duncan, who'd come over from Midway, I think, and I remember saying to him, and this is me as a fan. I mean, you can't meddle that in your job, right? In what we're doing when we're trying to be objective. When I'm there, I'm not always there as a fan. And where's the stuff? I've got to look at it objectively. And objectively, Rare had really struggled to find its place in Microsoft. And I think that the legacy had become a bit of a ball and chain for them.
Yes.
And I think it was actually quite smart to go, look, let's revamp everything. And,
and a lot of them didn't want to do it. A lot of them didn't want to do it. Greg didn't want to make a new Banjo.
Well, Greg has never wanted to make to look back, right? And this is the thing. And again, this is why I find it interesting. I'd love to have this conversation about Rare Replay. Is that Rare? You look at what Rare is, especially at that time. What is Rare? And Rare always makes new things. It never kind of sits and does the whole thing. However, I think probably the mistake made when they made this decision, 2014-ish, is that Rare was able to make new things because their teams were like 5 to 10 people, and they made a game in a year. In the NES days, some years they put out more than 10 games in a year. Right? They were prolific. That's how they kind of like they built up their war chest. In those days, they had a very rare agreement to make games with Nintendo because they'd allegedly kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like circumvented, like they'd worked out how to create games.
They'd done the EA thing, what EA did on Mega Drive.
Yeah, they had worked out themselves how to make games without any developer tools, right? So they got the license. So in those days, they were prolific. Whereas obviously now, I don't think that works so much. Like, because that is it. Rare has just been being what Rare has always been, and it's admirable, right? I mean, Sea of Thieves, and when they did Rare Replay, and this is when I was at PlaySonic, they had 2 codename projects. They had Sea of Thieves, and they had became Everwild. And they were certainly Everwild, you're talking, that was in prototyping more than a decade ago, when I was dev side. And they were trying to do something genuinely new. I mean, Sea of Thieves is a game that Greg's always wanted to make. And, he's one of the best game designers in the world, in my opinion, and that of many people. And the other game, Everwild, which became Everwild, from what I heard, at one point, it was like a Roblox type thing. And they were just trying to do something completely new, right? And that's been the trap for them. Every time I've had an update about that project over the last few years, it's always been the same thing, is they don't know what it is. Their original mandate was that it was going to be a game that had no combat, right? So then you're like, well, how do we make a Breath of the Wild type experience that has no combat, right? And then they struggled with that. So then they rebooted the team. They brought in Greg. And then I was really, really confident because everything Greg touches turns to gold. But I've just heard the same thing over the last couple of years, that at one point is a game about you'd be watching the stars and there'd be realistic animal births and things like that. And then it turned into like a Viva Pinata type thing. And it's not, for whatever reason. So that's admirable that they've done that. But here's my question to you, Chris, because you're a Rare expert. I look at Rare, and I thought this 10 years ago, and I think I'm vindicated even more now. I look at Rare, and I look at another historic studio, which is Insomniac. Insomniac know what they're good at, the type of game they're good at making, and they make them. They're a machine, right? They don't do we're going to make something completely new or whatever. The last 10 years, because of Rare's leadership or whatever, I mean, even Greg himself, who's the creative lead, doesn't want to, do old stuff, has actively pushed back on doing any classic IP stuff. I think this now vindicates what my opinion has always been, is that, do the new thing, but you should have had smaller teams making Banjo-Kazooie, making Blast Corps, making, Jetpack.
Yeah. I do think I've said this, to them. Some of them, people internally think the same thing.
Of course,
I do think that there's, I do think having a game like Sea of Thieves and and that's obviously been it's their most successful game and it's a new idea, but it's also, Sea of Thieves is also a first person game. It's also a platform game. It's also a pirate game. I mean, it's so rare, right? And you sit there and you go, they've got a style to them, but in one of their styles is 3D platformers. I don't, and I know that they would have looked at the numbers and things, but perhaps in a pre-age when Sea of Thieves and Everwild was commissioned, that was a time when Microsoft wasn't publishing games on Nintendo, right? And I think if you've got a game like Banjo-Kazooie, that game sold very well, and it probably would still sell very well today on Nintendo. And I think there's a they made Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. It didn't do very well. But I think you said something which I thought was quite interesting, which was that they didn't know what Everwild was. I don't know if Microsoft knows what it is, or Xbox.
No, I think as well, like, before I seem like I'm being unfair, I think a lot of this direction comes from being owned by Microsoft, that these teams are just doing what they feel like they are supposed to be doing, right? We're going to make the new thing for
this is what I tweeted.
Microsoft
They try to leave people alone. But the problem is they want to be a hands-off owner or a hands-off founder. But what that has led to in some cases, to come back around to Perfect Dark, is they were like, we're going to set up a West Coast game dev Avengers, and we're going to get all these big names in that have shipped all these incredible games at Sony and at Crystal or whatever. And they got all these people together and they said, here's an IP you can use, off you pop. And these people ultimately, for whatever reason, got lost a bit, and they did not help them or assist them. This is the telling that I've had, much at all. They left them alone until it was too late.
There is this. So I'm going to quote somebody who DM'd me, and it's somebody who works with an Xbox who said this line: when the Activision Blizzard deal was going through, they wondered if Xbox could give Activision Blizzard a bit of heart, and whether Activision Blizzard could give them a bit of brains, right? And there's an element of with Xbox. So the example is Xbox has to try things, right? Because it's been in third place for so long, right? It needs to try things in order to do new. And when you try things, things might not work out. But there's just that sense of sometimes you need to be a bit brutal. You don't have to be Activision Blizzard brutal, but you do every now and again have to go, right, you're messing up Perfect Dark. We're going to come in and we're going to meddle and we're going to cut things up and we're going to sort this stuff out. You sometimes need someone, there's certain things that I'm a bit like, when they bought, but one of the things I always find weird is when they bought Bethesda, because they bought Obsidian, and Obsidian at the time were making Avowed, which was sort of looked a bit Elder Scrolls-y. They're making The Outer Worlds, which looks a bit Fallout-y. And then they bought the company that makes Fallout and Elder Scrolls. And if under Activision, they just made Obsidian, you're now making Fallout and Elder Scrolls games. And there would have been people Microsoft probably commendably gone, no, we'll let you support and, follow your franchise. And that's probably the good thing. But also, and Obsidian are doing fine. But I do wonder if they had said, okay, you made The Outer Worlds, you're now just going to make a Fallout game. I don't think that many people in Obsidian would have minded that much. And then they would have had a Fallout game next to the new Fallout TV series. And I just think that is what, sometimes I do think there needs to be a bit of...
I think that's a broad Microsoft issue as well. I mean, I've worked with Microsoft as a journalist for 20 years, right? And we've all seen this. I always find them a very contradictory company. They're very big on culture, Microsoft, aren't they? Very big on culture. It's very important to them. They have people and processes in place. And that's just very contradictory for what they are. A multi-trillion-dollar company that if the graph goes down slightly, we're going to fire you all. It doesn't, and like, as you say, Phil Spencer's one of the most affable games execs there is. He's rightly getting a lot of criticism this week, but that doesn't make any previous praise of his work, suddenly, wrong. He has done a good job in the past. With hindsight, though, perhaps you needed more of a bastard.
Yeah,
they just needed to touch a bit more, and this comes back to what I said earlier about some studios perhaps have a better idea because they've been independent. I think Avowed is a really good example in the sense that I wonder what the scenario here was, but what I can say with absolute certainty is after Microsoft bought Bethesda, Obsidian rebooted Avowed and rethought it completely and scaled it back down from this huge open world thing, also had co-op elements and things, and we're going to make a short and sweet single-player adventure RPG that is a bit more manageable for us as a dev and a bit more manageable for the end user as an audience. What I'm curious about in that decision, and I should try and find out, is was that Microsoft coming in and saying, well, we've got Elder Scrolls now, so maybe shrink this back a bit. But based on stuff I've heard around their interactions with Rare and with the initiative and stuff like that, I think it's probably more likely that Obsidian was just happened to be a studio canny enough to make that decision on its own.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And had it not made that decision, it might have been.
And I think that's life as well, right? It's just, if you've removed the risk, people become complacent. We've seen that in the games industry for as long as it's existed, right? If big company buys you, first of all, the owners are leaving at the first opportunity because that's just life, right? They've started this bit. I mean, people don't talk about this enough in the public, I don't think, or aren't aware of it. Is that when Bullfrog is getting bought, Peter Molyneux, etc., are now very rich, and they are less interested in working weekends and evenings to put this game out because they have no risk. And also, they're now very rich, so they have got a clause that says that they have to stay for X amount, and then they're going to clear the hell off, and they're probably going to make a new studio and do it again. Like, that's just how it is, right? I mean, we've talking about Rare. I mean, the stamp Rare are the stampers. The stampers sold it, waited their clause, cleared the hell off, and a lot of that 10 years, the early 2000s years, and the teens. It was kind of trying to work out what Rare is without their founders, right? And that's a challenge that all of these companies face. But coming back to Rare, because I do find it a more interesting conversation about, because the Xbox thing to me, right, is that it's just the modern problem that we're facing everywhere. Is this late stage capitalism? Is they made like their last quarter, I think they made nearly 30 billion in profit. Microsoft is one of the biggest companies in the world. I mean, at points, it is the biggest company in the world. Like these layoffs were made, according to the Seattle Times, because of the amount of money it's pumping into AI, and it has to pump into AI.
Data centers are expensive.
But they need to put more money into this. It's like we need to reduce costs across our business. So according to them, that's partly, and I don't doubt it at all.
Yeah.
So I find like we're shouting at the brick wall at this point because no one seems to be listening in life. Nothing seems to be changing.
I guess for me, what frustrates me, they didn't need. It's not even. I understand. Here's the thing. I do understand, but they bought a lot of studios. They bought games like In Exiles and Double Fines and stuff, which are smallish studios that could be leveled up, and then they bought these mega studios. And I just sit there and think to myself, I look at Nintendo, everyone uses Nintendo as a wonderful example. They're not a flawless company, right? But they have, people talk about how they only have 9,000 staff at Nintendo. But actually Nintendo there's loads of studios that you associate with Nintendo, like Intelligent Systems, for instance, which are not actually owned by Nintendo, right? They're not Nintendo studios. Nintendo is invested in them. They might share a franchise together, all those sort of things. And they may be completely reliant on Nintendo. But ultimately, if that franchise was to take a downturn, that studio isn't just going to get closed because Nintendo don't have the power to do that. But equally, Nintendo aren't suddenly stuck with a developer they don't need anymore because their franchise is gone. And there's so much I think we're going to see a lot more from this from Microsoft. I think they own lots of teams they don't need to own, making games they don't really need. And I think that's my worry.
I mean, if you're Ninja Theory and your Compulsion games and your Machine games and your Double Fine, are you feeling safe right now?
Well, the question also is how much stuff was canned that we actually don't know about. Like, there's at least one game where someone very casually said to me, "Oh yeah, such and such studio had an unannounced game, and that's gone." And so we don't really know the full extent of the damage. There's actually an interesting thing about this when you bring up Nintendo in the East versus West debate. Someone messaged me the other day, like saying, "So why is it that Japan?"
Yeah, I thought you were good.
Is so successful, and I was saying, well, part of it is in the West we're all about explosive growth, which comes to these acquisitions, right? Like in the West, the attitude is we're gonna grow very quickly and get to where we need to be. When we decide what the destination is, we want to get there as quickly as possible. You look at Japanese game development, and what happened was they had an absolutely torrid, disastrous generation with the shift to HD, where you had all that embarrassing. You had the Square Enix infamous, I should say, not famous. HD towns are hard. When they started stripping towns and stuff out of Final Fantasy games because they were like, we can't afford to make these. Because they didn't want to do that explosive increase in staff numbers that the West was doing in order to make all the HD assets. That really hurt Japan in the short term, but because they were then more steady, because their growth curve looked like this, as opposed to like that, we're now seeing this resurgence where they finally got there and they're killing it, and they're killing it in a more economical and affordable way than us in the West.
That comes from the employment thing, right? There's pros and cons to this, right? Microsoft wants to try something crazy, Connect. It can hire loads of people knowing full well if it doesn't work out, they can just fire them again. So they can try things, they can give things a go, they can create teams, they can give people jobs really quickly. But equally, if it doesn't work out for them, they get rid of them. In Japan, it's a lot harder to get rid of people.
Yes.
A lot harder. When they hire people, it's done deliberately. It's done in the case of we're going to make sure there is actually a job for them and we need them and all that kind of stuff. So that means that actually Japan's
there's a cultural element as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lot more of a stable business working for a Japanese company in many ways, but they are not able to react as fast to things as a result. So it's an interesting. That's why Nintendo launching an entire building and hiring loads of staff is quite such a big thing. Like any other company doing that would be like, yeah, well, that's what happens when you're doing really well, isn't it? Well, not in Japan.
But it's tortoise and the hare, right? That's the thing. I guess that's what I'm saying. Is in this analogy, the West has been the hare, and it worked for a long time. And we're seeing it all over, right? Because it's not like Sony hasn't closed studios. It's not like EA hasn't, and so on and so forth. It's just that now Microsoft has got so big. I mean, my opinion, you know much better than I, Chris, but my opinion has always, on the Activision thing in particular, has always been, to some extent, I've always wondered if the Xbox business has only been profitable, like truly profitable, a certain number of quarters in its entire lifespan. And pretty much all of those, as I understand it, were in the 360 era. And part of me looked at the Activision acquisition was like, is this just spending 70 billion so that the bottom line finally is in the black because Activision is so profitable?
Well,
like was it a shortcut to being able to say Xbox is profitable?
There is a part of me that goes, I guess the plan is a thing. I can sit there and go, I say this a lot. When I interviewed Phil Spencer around the time he'd buying all those studios in Exiles and Double Fines and stuff, he said to me, we're looking for studios doing things that we're not in areas that we don't in. And I actually thought Sega would have been the perfect acquisition for them. Because it would have given them PC developers. They were looking to grow in PC. It would have given them games like Sonic, which gets them into the kids and the family market. It would have given them a load of big Japanese games. So it would have given them the things they were looking for. And instead they bought Bethesda that makes shooters and RPGs, which are things that Microsoft also make. And they bought Activision Blizzard, which make a lot of shooters and RPGs.
There can't be fewer, like less complementary publishers than Bethesda and Activision, right?
But Bethesda made sense to me. Activision did not, other than that money element. Bethesda made sense to me in the sense that no one at Xbox made an RPG on that scale. Fable's a different sort of thing, and at that stage, the new Fable, we didn't know how that was going to cut through.
Yeah.
Halo had dropped off a cliff, so Doom, in theory, filled a gap.
Yeah, Doom for me feels Gears of War, but it's in terms of aesthetically. But it's not. Here's the thing, though, as well. I keep saying this is a new. I actually wrote a piece saying the old Xbox is dead, but at the same time, when I sit, I can also convince myself it isn't, because Bethesda was very Xbox 360. And Call of Duty and Activision before PlayStation did the deal with the PS4 was very associated with Xbox 360. It actually, in many ways, they're still making these games. And I actually think it's great they're making, Clockwork Revolution and Keeper and still investing in those things. I just don't know how long for they'll do it, because there is a different business. They are a third-party company. They are a third-party publisher now. It's what they do.
But it's funny, even the third-party games, I think, there's a weird problem, and it's difficult to articulate because it's aesthetic, it's vibey, but you could look at the list of games, and I think you made this point in your piece, which was a brilliant piece, where if you look at the release list for next year, they've got a Halo game, they've got a Fable game, they've got a Forza game, whatever, next year.
Gears of War, yeah.
And Gears of War, and it looks like a classic Xbox release list from the heyday, and it's not. Don't get me wrong. The layoffs play a role in this, but it's the layoffs. It's various other factors. The sparkle has gone. The magic has gone.
Isn't the issue? It's not that it looks like a classic lineup, right? It's that they haven't been able to produce that classic lineup for a decade.
Yeah,
we've basically gone through the Xbox One era, and I still think. I mean, we were having this conversation years ago. I still think it's like unacceptable that the Xbox Series X, they had a whole run up to this generation, and it launched with nothing.
This is what I mean when I said that I'd write this piece about how they're persistently failed. It doesn't mean they haven't made good games. They have, but they failed the launch of Xbox Series X because they didn't have a game, right? They didn't have a tentpole title of any note that made people, you got to go buy this. There was a lot of great third-party games, but people buy PlayStation for those, right? There was, and it took them ages to deliver it. Game Pass was their big subscription play, and it started off very strongly, and then it sort of stalled. It's starting to uptick a little bit now, but it's not taking over the world like they'd pitched it. It just keeps not working, and as a result, they have to pivot. They have to put their games now on PlayStation. They're now a third-party publisher, and next year they do have a bunch of games that look Xboxy, and in fact, a lot of the people they've bought are Xbox. But Halo isn't a big franchise in the Xbox ecosystem anymore. Now they own Call of Duty. Gears of War is like, a lot of these franchises have faded and fallen by the wayside. So that's I guess that's sort of part of it. Another part of it is I don't think they generate a lot of excitement around these games, and that's linked to Game Pass. And this is something a Microsoft marketing person told me. The margin on these games are now really low, and what they mean by that is that game studios don't make a lot of money out of the games they're releasing only in Game Pass because there isn't enough. They're losing money because they're not selling as many premium titles. So the result of that means they're not marketing them as hard. There was a time, where they would celebrate a Halo launch, but like in the most epic way fashion.
Yeah, biggest entertainment launch of all time, whatever.
Yeah, it was all these big moments, and then Starfield was quite muted, and it was like, and it's because they've lost that margin. Now, of course, now they're launching the games in PlayStation. Maybe they can get a bit of margin back on these things, and they can start making money. Although I didn't see anything particularly big about the Doom release, but there was some interesting stuff around Indiana Jones. But what's it? Death Stranding 2 from PlayStation. Sure, it's probably only done 1 million units or 1.5 million units, but it's still, that's all profit. That's not all profit, so that's all revenue. And then they can take.
And you've got Kojima on a world tour.
Yeah, and then do these sort of fun things that get a bit of attention. And I don't know if Xbox is doing that. I think they might do now that the game's doing PlayStation, but I don't think they have been doing that. But now that they're doing it, they're not a console anymore. I mean, before someone shouts at me, yes, they still have consoles, but they're a third-party publisher.
Yeah.
Almost all of these games are going to be on PlayStation or Nintendo or both. So it's and I don't know. I think it's a shame. And the reason why we get angry, by the way, for all the PlayStation or the Xbox fans that get furious at us for this, is because we love Xbox and we love their games.
Exactly. The opposite of love is not hate, right? It's indifference.
Yeah.
Right? This would not be a 40-minute segment if we didn't give a shit about Xbox, right?
Yeah.
I'll say it out loud.
Speaking of a 40-minute segment, we do have to go for a break very soon, but I just want, before we move off from this, from each of you, the rumour mill spun up this week about Phil Spencer's succession plan and his retirement, and obviously that's something that has been discussed for some time. Dringo, briefly, because we could talk about this for another 40 minutes, what do you think his future is, and where do you see it going from here?
I don't think he's. I mean, if I were, he's been there a long time. He's got a nice little redundancy package here. We were all upset about. We all feel sorry for Greg Mayer was being made redundant, but I wouldn't be surprised if the only reason he had never quit in the first place is because he knew he was going to get a good payoff at some point. But I don't know. I get told all the time. I've been told for like 3 years, 4 years. Oh, I heard Phil Spencer's off. I heard he's off. It seems to be and every time someone said it, and loads of people said it to me in the last week and a half. Including people that I thought was definitely be in the know, and my reaction to them is, oh, is he? I'll believe him when I see it.
He must feel extremely fatigued at this stage, though. Like, I do agree that he's clearly not going anywhere anytime soon, but and that's the wording, right? They've said no, not going anywhere anytime soon. But the thing that has been said about, oh, he's going when the new hardware's out, feels like there's a ring of truth.
Yeah, but I don't think hardware's that important. I don't think it's not like that's the next big moment in the Xbox. It's not that important to them anymore.
I think it's like Dringo says, that there's been talk about him retiring for a long time now. That's intensified recently. That kind of level and that kind of personal decision, there's not many people who are going to know about it, right? Especially if it's really impactful to their bottom line. I think the most telling thing is that when that talk did start was around the time that they promoted him to this new position of head of Microsoft Gaming, and Sarah Bond was made president of Xbox. I think that's clearly structurally already a succession plan.
Notice how the AMD video, the AMD side of that, the tie-up that they're doing, the AMD side of that video was the AMD like big boss. I forget her name, but the equivalent of Jensen at Nvidia, and the Xbox side was not Phil, it was Sarah.
Yeah, I will say I think it's probably right for them to promote their other stuff rather than him being the figurehead for everything.
Yeah,
I will
I'm
also
sure they're
say
not doing it for the goodness of their heart.
every time I speak to Phil, and we have conversations here and there, and just snatches at events and things like that. I know if people told me he's retiring, I'm surprised because he seems as involved and engaged and caring about it. I was not surprised when Jim Ryan announced his retirement. He seemed, every time I talked to him, it was a bit like his reaction was it was like, it was always it was, whereas Phil doesn't seem like he's very much up for the fight. But who knows?
And he loves games. He clearly loves games, which is sort of the sad thing. I'm more surprised that leadership system there across the board has stayed the same over the last 18 months for all these layoffs. You would think.
Well, all those acquisitions. Bring some Activision Blizzard people into that mix. Bring some bastards in, as we were saying earlier. Bring some people in who get their games out on time and on budget. That from some of the divisions that you've bought, rather than I actually think Matt Booty's a really nice man. I think he's a really good guy, but he's probably proceeded over one of the most.
Oh, yeah, 100%. How he's still there is amazing, right? I mean, I was told about 10 years ago, whatever, Shuhei Yoshida's demotion, right?
Yeah.
When he was moved to run indie games, he was head of
Indies
Worldwide Studios.
Yeah.
Someone at PlayStation told me ahead of it happening that too many games had been delayed during PS4 era, and if Uncharted 4 didn't come out on time, that would be the last straw. And they delayed it, and then shortly afterwards, it was announced his new position. You just can't imagine something like that happening at Xbox, right? Halo Infinite. Could there be more pivotal, for them, delay than a new Halo game?
Delay, and also
how the fuck did that happen? How was that allowed to happen?
It was on the cardboard box for the Xbox Series X.
How was that allowed to happen? And yet, seemingly, no head rolled for that.
It doesn't even need to be, even if it's a case of what I find mad about it. Okay, I feel like I'm picking on Matt a little bit, but what I find a little bit mad about it is that that was a mistake, and there's been constant other mistakes, Redfall, and all these sort of mistakes, and he keeps getting promoted upwards. He's now in charge of Bethesda and Activision.
I just, for me, it's not even about someone getting the boot. It's if you are the person who's ultimately responsible for the studios, and you've just presided over that many games being cancelled, by hook or by crook, I think even if you're not being forced to walk the plank, you sort of go, I've got a big old parachute here, I'm going to fall on my sword. Symbolically for the executive team, almost to say one of us is also going as well. It's insane to me.
It's standards, isn't it? Coming back to the culture thing about your company getting bought by a big corporation, it's standards. So we can just slip. That can slip.
I think we need a break.
Thank you, Chris. Professional podcaster over here. We'll be back after these messages from the fine folks at God Knows. If you'd like to support VGC directly, you can do so at patreon.com/Video Games Chronicle. We'll see you in a minute. VGC is supported by Patreon. Check out patreon.com/Video Games Chronicle for more podcasts, ad-free browsing, and extra content. Thank you for your support. And we are back. Before we move on to some Nintendo chat, Andy, you wanted to talk about Greg Mayall's legendary, is it fair to say, not to editorialize, developer at Rare, who has now left the company in the wake of all this stuff.
Absolutely. According to sources, it's not been confirmed. I mean, obviously Microsoft have just left us in this void of no information anyway, which is understandable. They've got different regions, kind of laws, employment laws and stuff to wrangle. And especially in the UK, it is particularly strict, right? Like you can't just lay someone off. They'll be put on into consultation, and then you do a little pretend dance for a month and then you get laid off. But certainly multiple people have told me that he was he was running Everwild the last couple of years. He's was their first ever specific, specialized designer at Rare. He joined in the 80s. He's worked on all of their biggest games. He directed Banjo-Kazooie games, Donkey Kong Country games, Viva Pinata, Sea of Thieves. You can go on and on and on. He's worked on nearly 30 games. Grabbed by the Goonies, very underrated, aged very well. Definitely give that a go on backwards compatibility if you can. He's an absolute legend. Yeah, he's an absolute legend. For me, him going has felt as much like the end of what that company is as anything now.
That's the end of proper Rare.
Yeah,
I always used to say when the Nintendo fans used to go, well, everyone left Rare when Microsoft bought it. Rare's dead. I always used to say, well, no, because for a start, the guy who made Banjo-Kazooie is still there.
Yeah, and Paul Makachek and Chris Marlowe, but also Louisa Connor, who's also apparently also been.
Well, let's think about it.
She was
who's left? Like Robin? Robin's still there?
I guess, but maybe Chris Marlowe and.
I think being fair to everyone who's there, I think the most senior guys left are Robin and Greg. Like all of their other main guys, influential creators from that era. They're not there.
It's not to say there aren't talented people there, but it's just to say the people who were there in that Rare golden age are now pretty much all gone. Yeah. Pretty much.
Well, 25
and
years
that's incredibly sad. I don't know what next looks for them, or what next looks like for them now.
I think it looks like a new franchise. I think it looks like a new IP game, as in not new IP.
But I just don't know
a new
why
game
that would
from an
be
existing IP.
That's what I mean. Yeah, surely the lesson is, Coach, shall we go and do some easy wins?
If ever there was a time to hit the Banjo
IPs?
panic button, it was now. Surely.
I mean, I did a tweet that went everywhere, right? That
yes, I remember.
Like the talk for ages was that there's always outside interest in Banjo, but they're not interested, right? I mean, Greg is someone who doesn't look back. Notoriously, he said this on the record. He likes to do new stuff. The attitude from the studio leadership was always no. We're going to do the new thing. And I heard more recently the pitches are being listened to. I heard constantly the name that comes up is Toys for Bob, who really want to do one. Funnily enough, I heard Moon Studios as well was another one who's really interested. There's always talk about interest of a cartoon, of a movie, constant. And
it's a weird
maybe
one.
Banjo
is not that big a franchise. It's obviously iconic. I do think Rare should be someone like Rare to make it. I think it needs that sort of humor, as great as Toys for Bob's are. They've got Crash Bandicoot and Spyro.
I'd agree with you, but Greg literally designed those games, wrote all the dialogue, drew all the maps.
Yeah, but the people say he's been at Rare for the last 25 years. People like, Mike Chapman and all the teams, the people that are Rare now, worked underneath him, right? They've learned from him. They've got that sense of humor as well. If you ever play Sea of Thieves, it's full of that kind of nonsense. I do think that Greg legacy is going to live on. But one thing I'll say, but I've spoken to Greg before in various interviews, but I spent a lot of time with him last year because he did a panel at EGX around Donkey Kong Country, and he's always said no. Every time I said to him, hey, we're doing an anniversary special for Banjo-Kazooie, he goes, oh yeah, thanks for inviting me, but I don't look back, I don't do those sort of things. And then I asked him about Donkey Kong Country, and he sent me a really funny email where he said, Chris, you won't be surprised to know that actually, yes, I will do this one. And he brought in loads of like pictures and images and design documents, and literally the whole panel. I think it's on the EGX YouTube channel. I hope it is. That I did with.
I did not watch that.
Yeah, it was his brother Steve. It was.
Yeah, we went for a curry the night before, I think.
Yeah, and Dave Wise was on there as well, and Kevin Bayliss. That entire panel was basically formed by Greg, because Greg gave me so much material of that entire making of Donkey Kong Country that we even showed me like pictures of the juice cartons and all that kind of stuff they got made around that sort of thing. He's a legend. He made, and even now, like Donkey Kong Country, the new Donkey Kong game, Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is coming up, it's got the sort of music and the vibe and the feel of the games that he made.
I'm an old man and I'm a big fan, right? And I've worked with these guys. A lot of that, you see, talk about the tone and the humor. I don't think they can do that. Not the world's biggest corporation. It's got to go through several layers of. Do you know how much of that their games dialogue is made up of how many dick jokes can we get in? What's the most horrific thing we can get through without them noticing? That's their entire thing.
I think I've told this on this podcast before. My favorite is the grab by the ghoulies wanker.
Yeah.
There's the mummies in it, and they go what, and if you get them enough of them in the room, it sounds like wanker. It's all the way around. But they did on purpose.
They go what wanker. So if you've got loads of them like attacking you at once, it's just going wanker, wanker, wanker.
But yeah, I know. I didn't mean necessarily in terms of
they're like naughty boys, right? That's what this is the era. It's like you've got to make it with an indie team. You have to make it with a Platonic with a different spirit, I guess. Is that those games are made by 10 mates who are there all that in their 20s who've got nothing better to do, and they're putting stupid stuff into this game with the leadership of the Stampers, who are two of the best business people, you know, in the history of the UK games industry, who know how to ship something and know how to get things done where they're not going to go down blind alleys. And it's I don't know, it's just going to sound bitter and horrible, but I mean I thought at the time, coming back to speaking to Craig Duncan like 10 years ago when they're doing Sea of Thieves, it felt like, you know what, because we're having this exact same conversation. It felt like the best thing to do is to move on and do something else, you know, just because you're constantly going to have this. Why don't you do another band? Why don't you do that? Just change your logo, change your name, do something else, you know, because I don't think it's useful. But inevitably, we're going to get some rolled out now.
I don't know. I also think Nintendo, the fact that Microsoft's a third-party publisher on Nintendo creates an opportunity for. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be Banjo. It could be something like Banjo. It could be something of that. So I think if they release Grab by the Ghoulies on the Switch too, they might find.
And Nintendo are definitely interested, by the way. Definitely.
You know what they should do?
Like they're aware of that. Banjo and Smash was one of their biggest, like by all metrics, one of their biggest announcements.
They should make a game that is another one of those characters. Because obviously, when they did Diddy Kong Racing, they'd intended to make a game with all of those characters. So they should finally do the Tip Top game or whatever the tiger was called. That's what and then they can have
Bumper is going to get his game.
That's exactly what I mean. And they should have Banjo Kazooie in it as cameos and Conquer or whatever. But they
Bumper,
should make
the Geordie Badger.
Yeah, but then again, Microsoft's got Spyro, they've got Crash.
Well, this is what I was going to bring on to this. They don't need the Banjo, and they don't need anything of Rare really. Sea of Thieves is okay; it's doing well, but it's not exactly World of Warcraft. And I just sit there and think, you know, maybe someone might want to buy them, and pick up some of those brands, Nintendo.
This is Chris Dring's pet dream.
I feel like Nintendo would never shame themselves by buying an IP from a load of Westerners. I don't think they would ever do it, to be honest. I just cannot see.
I think they don't. Yeah, they don't need it. Well, they don't need it. I mean, they're definitely. I wouldn't be shocked because they're definitely aware of like the Banjo IP and Smash.
Yeah, and they signed that deal to get all the games into.
But a lot of that is,
and they're definitely aware of it. They're definitely aware of the creators. A lot of that, like I heard that even like, you know, with what's gone on with people leaving and stuff, that they're aware of that. But I mean, the reason they didn't buy Rare in the first place is because they're like, well, they look at Western Studios and they're like, well, you're going to leave, and then they did. Yeah,
but now that Nintendo's such a nostalgia business and they can see the value of that, and they've signed that deal with Rare to get those games into Nintendo Switch Online, and they did that. Say Banjo Kazooie and Smash. I wouldn't be surprised. I bet it wouldn't cost a much. Anyway, that's me fanboying. That's my like a fanboy fantasy that rather than anything else.
It's just I would be excited about that pre-Greg leaving, but again, no offense to Rare's wonderful employees. It's just different, isn't it? It's just a different company.
I don't know.
There's a power though. There's a power though to there will be people at Rare and there will be people in the industry at large where if Rare is able to announce and say we're doing a new Banjo Kazooie, there's people to whom those games are very special, who are our age now or like my age, 30s, whatever, or younger, and you can't underestimate the power of those people. So yes, a Banjo without Greg is a grim proposition. Well, the same way like a Conquer without Chris is a grim proposition. But there is an argument for just look at Sonic, right? The best Sonic game in the last 20 years was made by a bunch of lads who were just fanboys, basically.
It's worth noting that, you know, people move on. The idea is they pass on that experience of Mike Chapman, who runs Sea of Thieves. He's so much like Greg. And he also is a massive Rare fanboy. Like he understands, he gets it, and he's got that sort of vibe about him. We're all kind of Rare-ish. We never worked there, you know. Yeah. I
think, but it's different. The culture there is different from the fact that they're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, so I worked at Platonic round the corner. They've got nothing to do other than make games and drive through fields in Ferraris, you know, like it just creates a certain type of personality.
And the conditions in which those games were created, like like whether that's Banjo, whether that's Perfect Dark, whether that's GoldenEye, whether that's Conquer, will never exist again. Because you would be instantly cancelled and shut down.
The Stampers used to say, if you work 9 to 5, you'll make a 9 to 5 game. That was a quote. We don't make 9 to 5 games.
Well, maybe in the future, Rare can make a new Donkey Kong Country. Speaking of Donkey Kong, story number 2, only 58 minutes into this podcast, Nintendo confirms Donkey Kong Bonanza's developer is, quote, the same team as Super Mario Odyssey. Andy, you have played some of Donkey Kong Bonanza.
So has Alex, yeah.
And Alex has. Chris, have you played it? I've not.
No, but my son is so excited about it. We've watched the direct video about, I'm not joking, 10, 15 times. And
my daughter as well.
Every day after school, he goes, is Donkey Kong out yet? So because of his excitement for it.
My kids are, by the way, are at the age now where I have to tell them, like, you can't tell people at school that you're playing this game. we went to I think it was EGX, was it, at this big Super Mario Wonder booth, Nintendo big booth. And I had told my youngest, who would have been like 6 at the time, you cannot tell everyone that you've got Super Mario Wonder at home. Like, it's a secret, right? And she told one of the Nintendo booth staff, she went, I got a secret. You know what? I've got this at home. And, they're thinking like, oh, yeah, have you?
There's something about it, because my daughter also is obsessed with the trailers of this, though, so it's definitely got the right energy.
Maybe all of these children are excited because Nintendo has said that it's the same team that developed Super Mario Odyssey. However, they wouldn't confirm basically anything beyond this. The team is based in Tokyo. Andy, does this mean that these are just developers that are sitting at the same desks as the Super Mario Odyssey team?
I don't know. I mean, I thought that I'd, the rosier days ahead with perhaps less angry, fired up Xbox fans to abuse me. But then I discovered that Nintendo has their own ones as well.
I read on Reset Era that you're an idiot that doesn't know what you're doing.
Apparently, I'm like, I hold the record. Like, in fact, 20, 25 plus people got banned in that thread.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Of all the people to attack, like of all the people to accuse of being
anti-Nintendo, the guy on the other day that called me Nintendo hater.
You're famously hating Nintendo.
Oh, you idiot!
Do you remember that time I said Mario Wonder? Before Mario Wonder was announced, and Nintendo didn't have any big games left on the Switch One. But even now, Nintendo fans think I hate Nintendo. I'm a massive PlayStation fanboy. When,
you can't be, you're not allowed to criticize, or be objective if you're a fan, of course, right? So lots of people were confused by this story because partially they don't know what a crosshead is, or that if you put something bold, it must not be part of the body copy, or that if you quote something somewhere that's not the body copy, then it's a made-up quote somehow. Media literacy schools are available. I asked Nintendo, who is making this game? They said, the same team that developed Super Mario Odyssey, which that's to me, so you Nintendo EPD then, I'm assuming.
EPD 8,
it's based in Tokyo, they said. Right, so,
It's EPD 8,
yeah. So when you say the same team, do you mean the same people that made the same personnel that made Odyssey are making this game, or do you mean another team within EPD 8? No comment.
Well, I mean, you've got to look at it this way, right? Their production groups are a bit like Square Enix is structured in a similar way. Their production groups are massive. So production group 4 is like that small game group. So Nintendo probably could call that one team, but that one team made like 1-2 Switch, Labo, Ring Fit, Miitopia, or production group, what's the Metroid one? I think the Metroid one is 7, but they also do like they did like Famicom Detective Club and all that stuff. So it's like any individual or like 5 is Animal Crossing and Splatoon. That's the same team, but obviously Animal Crossing and Splatoon are not the same team. It's like how at Square, Final Fantasy 7 and Kingdom Hearts are the same, whatever they call them, creative unit. Which is the same team, but it's not the same team. I think the likely answer when we look at the credits is going to be that someone that had a section designer role, a section director
that's
role
usually what happens. Yeah,
on Odyssey is going to be the actual director of this game. That's what I think.
I mean, there have been on top of the mainline producer who's been involved for ages. Obviously, there's 2 co-directors on the last couple of Mario games. So you could split, but the thing is, there's a lot of telltale signs for me. Again, I really apologise to Nintendo fans for criticising an upcoming game, but there's lots of little things about it that, for me, were telltale signs that this is not. For me, the Mario 3D Mario team is peak Nintendo, right? It's peak standards, and I know this for a fact as well. That if Miyamoto is in charge of this brand, you're under his standards, right? He will not let you release it. I know I'm contradicting myself because Donkey Kong is also, but Donkey Kong was under the stewardship of Retro for a long time. Like, I know that if you wanted to do something on Donkey Kong, you had to ask Retro for permission. Like, they're like that, right? They'll have their producers who oversee certain franchises.
And so to be clear, also that also would be Production Group 6, because Retro reports in these matters. Retro reports to Production Group 6.
There's a producer there, isn't there?
So that's that weird thing. If someone in Japan might ask Retro, who then might ask someone in Japan.
So there's lots of little things that I thought, this doesn't feel like a 3D Mario game. The controls are too complicated and convoluted. The camera is bad. The core mechanic is quite flawed, I think, like Smash stuff. Okay. But that said, it's very clearly the same. It's got the same UI. It's got the same structure and possibly the same engine. A lot of elements of this are clearly the same as Odyssey. So that, to me as well, if I mean, there's been a lot of rumors that they've been trying to split into 2 major teams, which is very difficult to do for any studio. If you were going to spin off another team in within your company, with your department, whatever, before people start splitting at hairs, what you would do is you go, hey, section designer, lead designer on Odyssey, why don't you go and make this game again with this character? Give them a good, decent shot of it. Like, i.e., hey, we've made Spider-Man. Why don't you go and make Spider-Man Miles Morales? Right? So and then after that, they're training people up all the time, right? But again, it's speculation.
Oh, what was Majora's Mask?
Every chance we're going to have egg on our face. That
was it somebody?
This will be the main guys. I'd be stunned, right? They're not working on a 3D Mario game.
Of course. Stephen Tortillo did a thing about how the maps are like the dioramas in Captain Toad.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
And Captain Toad,
because it's 3D,
is the same.
I love you.
Well, no, but the actual map, the way I think he's onto something there, and also it is the same production unit again. So even if it's like, maybe that was what they said, maybe they were like, you guys from Captain Toad, can you commit? But I think he's probably onto something there.
But so the other thing as well is that, and again, I've been saying this since the day they announced it and I played it in Paris, is that I don't think it's a good game to demo. So I'm being quite nitpicky about certain things. And by the way, this only happens because they won't tell us who's making the bloody game. Like, oh, this doesn't feel like Mario. This is a vacuum that they have created, right? And people at higher up, it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what VGC says. It doesn't matter what any of us say. People, the bigger picture, they don't give a shit that we're talking about this stuff, right? And it does not matter. But it doesn't change the fact that I am talking about it because of their policy. But I said right at the start, this is a bad game to demo. If I gave you 10 minutes of Mario Odyssey, right, didn't tell you who was making it, so you're already going in very suspect. Is this Bandai Namco? Are you trying to hide off a stinker to me?
Wow, Bandai
some different ideas. No offense, Bandai Namco, but if you're making a Mario game, you're going, which they might well again. I've not finished the game.
Can't wait.
We're all out. Like, this could be an all-timer. This is going to get clipped.
This is like Chris Scullion's
directed by Shigeru Miyamoto.
I can't wait for this to be. I can't wait for this to be the Odyssey team, and then the next 3D Mario.
Yeah, it's a spin-off.
Bandai Namco.
Oh, yeah. but I will come back to. I said it again. I'm sorry. I love digressing. I said it right at the start, and I maintain this. It's a difficult game to demo. If you didn't tell people who made Odyssey and you gave them 10 minutes of it out of context, here you go. What is this? Oh, you can throw a hat. Okay, possession in games has been done loads of times. Is it that interesting? I'm a Goomba, but I'm a frog, I can jump. That's not the Odyssey's genius comes from the scale of its imagination and ideas and mechanics, right? That game is better than the sum of its parts. It throws ideas at you and then takes them away as quick as they were introduced. The Tokyo-based Mario team have been doing that since, back to Galaxy, right? They famously, it's like how Astrobot made their game recently. They have post-it notes of a million ideas and they whittle down to the best ones and they just throw them at you again and again. But if you're going to play it for 10 minutes, you're like, well, that's sort of fun. But then when you play it as a scope, you're like, okay, this is thoroughly entertaining. Every 10 minutes, you're doing something different. And then you're on a roller coaster. And then now you're climbing this thing. And then now you're swimming down here. I think that there's lots of evidence in the 3 hours I played with Donkey Kong. That's that type of game as well. You're playing a 2D level, then you're doing a mini boss, and then you're smashing through this thing, then you're fighting, something else. And then it's a platforming section. There's just a ton of variety and ideas in there. So I think there's every chance that I play when I will re-reviewing it. When I finished it, I will, say that this is great. It doesn't. Really
I expect a lot of it is going to hinge on the level design. We talked about this right after the preview session, saying we played 3 levels basically, 2 from the start and then 1 from deeper into the game. Who knows how far? I'm going to take a punt and guess it's probably about halfway. And I said to you, the one that was halfway, was almost a bit too complicated for its own good, in the way that a lot of the worst bits of Banjo-Tooie were.
Yeah, I totally
that was the
see
comparison
what you mean.
I made to you. But part of it is, I think it's probably quite difficult to do good level design when it's designed to get smashed to bits. So it'll be interesting that's the thing I'm most interested to see. In terms of variety and stuff, I sort of have no doubt that the game's just going to be rammed with variety.
It feels very, very nostalgic, isn't it? Like, even Odyssey is not a true, Odyssey was it's the return to the open world Mario structure, but it's not sort of really, is it? It's got a vehicle mechanic where you go from, they've disguised a level select screen as you get in a vehicle and you go somewhere else. But this one, again, these worlds are properly, they feels like a rare platform.
It's got a nostalgic feel in a way that a Sakurai game has a nostalgic feel. Sakurai is a real scholar of video games history, and you see that in Smash. I feel like there's been a Sakurai-esque hand applied to how they've looked at Donkey Kong in its whole, be that the original arcade game, be that Rare's contributions, be that Retro's contributions. It wouldn't surprise me if there's some pretty cute Jungle Beat reference in there or another. Or Donkey Kong.
That's the other thing is that I thought when I was playing it is that this is the next Donkey Kong from the Donkey Kong Jungle Beat team, right?
Well, that was EPD8, so there probably is people.
That was their
EPD8.
first. I seem to without before the nerds come at me. I'm pretty sure that was their first game.
I think so. So there's probably people there who worked on that,
which is one of the most underrated Nintendo games because you need a pair of pissing bongos to play it. But it's brilliant. Yeah, so it does kind of it does have a lot of vibes of the next game from the guys who made Jungle Beat.
They should put new bongos out and sell them on NSO and put that game on the GameCube collections. Yeah. I have absolutely no idea why I bought this.
Well,
Literally no idea.
Mine's still in the box.
There must be mine is over
so good.
I bought 2 for some reason.
This is the problem, by the way. This is exactly the problem with all of this. But hey, these
at least I didn't buy 4 because that's how many N64 NSO controllers I've used, and I can tell you, I have never used one of them. They got taken out of the boxes, they got put in a cupboard, and they've never been used. So that was a waste of £200.
Yeah, well, you waste 200 quid again in your life, but at least you have the joy of looking at them and going, "Oh, that's quite nice." That's ultimately the reason we do all of these things.
The N64 controllers, actually, I can get that shot.
Here we go. If you would like a signed N64 controller from Alex Donaldson,
it's a pretty good one. Polymega. This is the Polymega one. Actually,
if you just order it now, you might get it after the next millennium.
The controllers just ship, actually, if you order the machine. But obviously, on the end, it's a normal N64 thing. So these are really reasonably priced compared to buying good condition actual N64 pads on eBay, which are hideously expensive. And it takes all the shit. So, in fact, buying the Rumble packs was more expensive than buying the pads because I had to buy 4 Rumble packs because we were going to play 4-player Mario Party on a lad's
Did you know, a little bit of trivia for you? I might have even said this on the podcast before. I can't remember what I say. I repeat myself. I'm sorry.
We've done nearly 130 of these, don't worry.
Yeah. The reason the Rumble pack takes batteries is because in testing they found out that if you use 4 of them, it can't draw enough power.
Yes.
So for that one situation, you've got to buy batteries for it.
In my cupboard somewhere here, well, not in here. It'll probably be in the garage. But I've got a prototype Rumble pack which doesn't take batteries.
Oh, you've got one.
Yeah,
it was on
eBay like 20 years ago, and I was like, "Whoop!"
Oh, you see, that's when you needed to be on eBay 20 years ago, unfortunately. But yeah, no, the reason that's known is because people have picked up development ones, and they don't need batteries.
Yeah.
Dringo, what was the last thing you wasted money on?
3 Nintendo Switch 2s.
So he's the reason there's a stock shortage.
I think most of the games media is the reason there's a stock shortage because there was just across VGC. I think we had 9 or 10 of them, and there's 3 of us. So it was really, really quite ridiculous.
I might put a Nintendo Switch 2 like onto my Vulix arcade machine just to sit in it.
Yeah.
I ended up lumbered with one because the retailer their return.
Oh yeah, I was with you. Yeah,
their return window is only their return window is only 1 week. So then when I tried to, and obviously because we were out in LA at SGF, I couldn't return it within a week. And then when I got back and I rang them, and they were like, "No, you shit out of luck." Thankfully, one of my mates bought it off me. But yeah,
I know what PlayStation fans, or not all PlayStation fans, in fact, only very, very few PlayStation fans think they wasted money on. It's a PS5 because you can get Helldivers 2 now on a.
Look at this podcast professional.
It's stark, right? It's stark that Chris Dring has started making videos in the last 4 months. Now he's like,
I couldn't believe it when I was at SGF and Andy and Chris recorded their episode of the games business podcast.
Businesses.
What's happening with games? What be selling? It was incredible to watch Chris edit on the fly and tell he has an editor to cut stuff out. All of this crap just has to go in my head, and I'm like, okay.
If you work for Big Jeff, mate.
Yeah, well,
he's got a guy with just off of camera now. He's got a guy holding a boom mic.
Another guy with cue cards saying "Throw to the Helldivers news." If Jeff wants to buy this podcast, we're very amenable and very cheap. I just need a couple of cases of Lando Norris Monster, and I'll be quite happy. Helldivers 2 coming to Xbox the same day Gears goes to PlayStation. Hilarious news to drop this week. Very strange tonally. This Helldivers thing has been kind of in the ether for a little while, but strange. Dringo, what's the point in this when no one has an Xbox?
Great question. It's a game that actually suits the Xbox audience, right? I mean, we're in this. So many people online that seem to be quite not just obviously obsessed fanboys that can't handle the fact that we're in games coming to other platforms. We're in this situation in not just games, but the whole of entertainment, where there's not enough time to play things, to watch things. There's too much stuff and not enough time.
It's the attention economy, right?
Yes, yeah, right. And that's particularly hitting games at the moment because not just games, not just TV, not just films, things like TikTok as well, social media. It's all eating up people's time. And games has actually seen a drop in the amount of hours people are spending on video games. We're seeing people who are spending less time on video games now than even before the pandemic in the US. So video games is an industry is having a bit of a combative problem. And so the idea is how can you get more people to engage in your property, play your game, or just know about your thing? And the answer is you need to expand it out. And that expansion, yes, sometimes means PlayStation putting games on PC and occasionally other platforms. Yes, it means Xbox doing its doing. It means putting your games on TV and film and cinema, making theme parks, doing alarm clocks. All of that is part of this same idea of getting your games in front of more people, so more people know about it, so more people engage with it in whatever way possible. Nintendo's doing it. They're doing it in mobile. They're doing it with films. They're doing it with theme parks, museums. PlayStation's doing it. They're doing it they put Lego Horizon on Switch. That, by the way, lots of people say that was a Lego decision. It was not a Lego decision. It was a Sony decision. And the Helldivers 2 is the same thing. Xbox doing, obviously, Xbox is doing it in a far more advanced way, but Xbox has got a lot less to lose here. They don't have much. Their platform business is a lot smaller, and as a result of that, it means their games sell a lot worse. They have a few smaller audience. Going fully multi-platform makes sense to them. PlayStation, it doesn't make sense for them to go fully multi-platform. It will hurt their platform business if they were to do that. But there are certain games where would Lego Horizon on Switch hurt PS5? No. Is Helldivers 2 coming out on Xbox 18 months after the game launched on PlayStation 5 going to hurt PlayStation? No. Right. So there's certain decisions they're making, and Nintendo, they're not. But
also they've been, and I'm amazed at how much of the discourse is missing this. They've been incredibly upfront, right? That they do not view the release platforms for their live service games as the same as for their single player games. Yep. I mean, they've said this in length. Our single player games are different consideration. We give value to people who buy a console. We're being very mindful of when we put them on PC even. But, Marathon is coming out on Xbox. Obviously, Destiny and all of its stuff is still on Xbox. MLB The Show is on Xbox. They've been long saying that their live service stuff is going to be multi-platform.
Yeah, and it kind of needs to be if you want to create a successful.
The story is probably why Helldivers wasn't on Xbox last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Xbox isn't, as Jordan suggested, like people don't own an Xbox outside of the US, really, in the UK. It's a really small platform. It's not that big a deal, but it is a game that suits, it's a big sort of online shooter thing. It does suit that Xbox audience. The fact it's coming out the same week as Gears of War is a bit poor timing.
It's top 10 respect moments in football. Like, we're swapping franchises. It's really nice. I think it's very weird. Helldivers 2 is a weird one because I liked that game when it first came out, but it's the game that's made me feel kind of like an old man. Like I've missed so much of the live service aspect of it. I feel like I can't get back in. Yeah. And they even put Killzone shit in it, and that's meant to appeal to me directly, the one person on Earth that would like Guerrilla to go back to Killzone. And I was still like, not so sure about this. Don't make that face, Alex. Do you not remember in Killzone 3 where you had to plant a bomb and then use the 6-axis to turn your controller to the side, thus activating the bomb?
I would rather have a new Killzone I'd rather replay a Killzone game than replay a Resistance game. I'll say that.
Yeah.
But that is like choosing which hand you're going to put a knife through, though, isn't it?
I don't know, mate. When I saw that first demo of Resistance Fall of Man, I was like, oh my God, this is games.
How old were you at the time?
It was at 2006. I was 11. So
yeah, that sounds about right, mate. Because we thought you looked shy.
Yeah, but you lot think everything looks shite. Cynical British games media can never be pleased unless it's some absolute garbage. This is why we need Chris Gallion in this podcast.
Man on PS3.
So it's your fault.
Figures.
I was tested Uncharted 1, Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction. It was a good year. Snake Ball, Warhawk, tested that as well.
You tested all the shittest PS3
games. They were all PS3 launch titles. Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction.
It's like if you walked into a room, right, and said, I tested a dozen PlayStation games during a launch, right? At the entire era of PlayStation's 30-year history, if they picked one era that they'd be disappointed that you tested, it would be that one.
Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction is classic.
I wanted to check this, and I was just looking it up, so I was like, what were the PS1 launch games? But to be fair, Ridge Racer, good. Yeah. Rayman, Ridge Racer, Wipeout, Rayman, I would say are probably the
Jumping Flash.
Jumping Flash.
Air Combat.
What a banger! Chris, did you test
Battle Arena to Shinden? I feel like that's a good game. Street Fighter the movie, the game, absolute banger. PS1's pretty weird. It did have NBA Jam Tournament Edition, which is excellent, one of the best sports games of all time. However, it was also on the Mega Drive. And the Super Nintendo.
PS2 was like Fantavision and
PS2 was insane.
Smuggler's Run.
Yeah, listen to this PS2 list.
Time Splitters.
Listen to this PS2
SSX.
Listen to this PS2 list. Armored Core 2, Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore, Dynasty Warriors 2, International Track and Field, Winter Games Snowboarding, Eternal Ring, really weirdly underrated From Software game. Someone's at the door. Evergrace, Fantavision, Gun Griffin Blaze, no idea what that is. Kessen, Madden, Midnight Club, NHL, Orphan Scion of Sorcery, don't know what that is. A billiards
That sounds like
game,
a game you'd be well into. That's RPG
Ready
site
to
all the way
Rumble
down.
Round 2, Ready to Rumble Round 2 Classic, Ridge Racer 5, Silent Scope, Smuggler's Run, SSX, Street Fighter EX3, Summoner.
Yeah, but they're all
Swing
third-party
Away
games. I was a Sony.
Yeah.
That's
That's true.
Sony. I also tested Splinter Cell Double Agent around that time as well.
Now that's a good game. That's a real game. I mean, my favourite Splinter Cell will forever be whatever the stupid one is, where he
Chaos
smashes
Theory.
No, Chaos Theory is the better game. But my favourite Splinter Cell game is always the stupid one where he smashes the bloke's head into a urinal at the start of the game.
Black. It's not Black.
Maybe I remember, you must have been there that year, one of the two of you guys. Like, that year they had like a stage and screens on all four corners of the Ubisoft booth. And they were just playing that demo over and over again. And a hype man stood on the stage and was like reacting to Sam Fisher doing his Jack Bauer 24 act, smashing this guy's head into a urinal while, a black guy who's been hired to be a hype man is going, woo! As he does it on the corner of the booth. And they had the volume on it turned up so loud that if you were in any of the four booths that were immediately adjacent to Ubisoft, you could just hear that 5 minutes looped for the whole show. So it's burned into my memory.
Let me tell you, as someone who's done E3 as a journalist and as a developer,
it'd be worse to be in the booth.
Much harder to be a developer.
Yeah, I know.
Mentally.
But if you were on Square Enix's booth, you had to listen to that 5 minute loop all day for 9 hours a day for 3 days.
Right, boys.
Michael Ironside going, tell me where the thing is, as he's smashing some bloke's head into a toilet.
Maybe they should make a new Splinter Cell.
My memory of that game, you tell me that Double Agent, is that they tried to make that game about 4 times. I'm sure every game was the same game. They're like, yeah, he's a double agent, and then it was a bit shit. I mean, we're doing it again, but now he's a double agent. Like, they just sort of pretend that it didn't happen.
Well, that's sort of the James Bond thing of every 2 or 3 films he gets his license revoked and has to go around. It's pretty standard.
Right, we're going to call it there because we've been talking for a hell of a long time now. We'll be back next week with plenty more, potentially the most exciting podcast ever released, but we'll see. And that's every week on the VGC podcast. Chris Dring, where can people find you? I won't even say the incorrect name. You can plug it properly now.
Come to thegamebusiness.com. We've had a really good week this week on thegamebusiness.com. We had a big interview with Sega's president and COO, and it's been really popular. And we've got a load of those coming up. So yeah, thegamebusiness.com. Come check it out.
Nice. And Alex, what are you doing?
These days, I mean, primarily visit RPG site, rpgsite.net. If you're into role-playing games, that has everything you need for role-playing games. And especially if you've just, if you get embedded in with the Switch 2, we're doing a lot of pretty much every RPG you can imagine that is compatible with the Switch 2. We're doing all these deep performance tests. So like every Xenoblade game tested, every Fire Emblem, every Final Fantasy, all the rest.
Xenoblade?
Really cool.
Come on now. Andy will be thrilled.
Yeah, and I'm also on Eurogamer.net. If you're into, I mentioned James Bond. If you're into James Bond, I've got an article just gone up on Eurogamer about the IO Bond game, which I think is pretty cool, taking a look at how they're sort of adapting some of the Bond shit from the films and books, because I'm a nerd for that.
I thought that was very good. I hate reading games media generally, but I thought that was very interesting because it was.
I hate it too, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's why we get along. Andy, you got a website?
The games businesses.
Yeah.
.net.
Yep. We've got an interview with the CEO of Factor 5 who's going to talk about Lair for 5 hours. It's going to be really good. I'm looking forward to it. Nothing else from us. Patreon.com/Video Games Chronicle. A new episode of Off Topic just went up talking about me turning 30 and hating scalpers for an hour or so. Much more to come. You can find all these boys on various social medias. Until next time, say goodbye, Alex.
Bye-bye.
Say goodbye, Alex.
Bye-bye. I can't wait to turn my air conditioner back on because I'm sweating like a pig.
Say goodbye, Chris.
Toodaloo.
Say goodbye, Andy.
Goodbye.
And we'll see you next week.